Maverick Knight had spent 39 years believing one simple truth. He would never fall in love with a black woman. Not because anyone had forced that belief on him. Not because he openly hated them. It was something quieter. Something far more dangerous. A prejudice so deeply woven into his upbringing that he had stopped questioning it years ago. To him, black women simply didn't belong in his world. Then one evening, one unexpected conversation shattered everything he thought he knew. And by the time it was over, the billionaire who had spent his entire life controlling every outcome would discover that the one thing he could never control was his own heart. Maverick Knight wasn't a man who welcomed distractions. At 39, he had built one of the most powerful business empires in the country. His company stretched across multiple industries. His fortune was measured in billions, and every decision he made moved markets. People feared disappointing him. Competitors avoided challenging him. Even in a room full of influential people, conversations softened the moment he walked in. Control wasn't just part of his personality. It was his identity. Relationships were never more than temporary. Women admired him. Some wanted his attention. Others wanted his last name. But none of them ever stayed long enough to matter. That was exactly how Maverick preferred it. His life followed a perfect routine. Business. Success. Power. Repeat. Until one ordinary invitation changed everything. The rooftop of the Avalon Grand Hotel shimmered beneath thousands of golden lights. Crystal chandeliers hung above elegant lounges while a live jazz quartet filled the warm evening air with smooth melodies. Below, the city skyline sparkled against the river, creating a view that looked almost unreal. Arthur Langston's 50th birthday wasn't just another celebration. It was a gathering of billionaires, politicians, celebrities, and some of the most powerful people in the country. Maverick attended out of respect, not excitement. Arthur had been one of his closest friends since their Harvard days. Skipping the party simply wasn't an option. Inside, champagne flowed freely. Expensive laughter echoed across the rooftop. Conversations revolved around billion-dollar deals, private islands, luxury yachts, and the latest acquisitions. To everyone else, it was glamorous. To Maverick, it was painfully predictable. Within 30 minutes, he had already spoken with a senator, declined 2 investment proposals, and politely escaped a conversation with a famous model who seemed far more interested in his yacht than in him. He stepped toward the balcony, swirling a glass of 18-year-old scotch while staring at the skyline. For the first time all evening, he finally felt alone. Then, someone walked in. Without realizing it, Maverick looked up. And forgot to breathe. She wasn't trying to attract attention. She simply had it. Her deep purple satin gown reflected the soft glow of the chandeliers with every graceful step. She moved with effortless confidence, not the kind that demanded attention, but the kind that never needed to ask for it. Then Maverick saw her face. Her rich brown skin seemed to glow beneath the lights. Her eyes were calm, intelligent, and quietly confident. There was warmth in her smile. Strength in her posture. And a quiet elegance that no designer label could ever create. Something inside him shifted. His heartbeat quickened. For reasons he couldn't explain. He couldn't look away. A familiar voice echoed somewhere in the back of his mind. She's not your type. Walk away. For years, that voice had always won. Tonight, it didn't. His eyes remained fixed on her as though the rest of the room had disappeared. The music faded. The conversations blurred into silence. All he could see was her. Who is she? He whispered almost unconsciously. No one answered. Because no one had even noticed he was speaking. She walked calmly toward the bar, thanked the bartender with a warm smile, accepted her drink, and stood quietly by herself, completely comfortable without anyone's attention. That fascinated him even more. Most people at parties like this desperately wanted to be seen. She looked perfectly content being herself. Before he could overthink it, Maverick finished his scotch in one slow sip, straightened his jacket, and did something he almost never did. He walked toward a woman, without knowing what he planned to say. For the first time in years, the billionaire who negotiated billion-dollar deals without blinking was actually nervous. "Good evening," he said. His voice sounded calm, but inside, his pulse was racing. She turned toward him. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Then she smiled politely. "Good evening." Up close, she was even more breathtaking. Her hair was styled into a graceful bun, while a pair of diamond earrings caught the light every time she moved. Yet what struck Maverick most wasn't her beauty. It was her composure. She wasn't impressed by him. She wasn't intimidated by him. If anything, she seemed to be deciding whether he was worth talking to. "I don't believe we've met," Maverick said, offering his hand. "I'm Maverick Knight." A flicker of recognition crossed her face. She clearly knew exactly who he was. But unlike almost everyone else, she didn't react. No excitement. No flattery. No attempt to impress him. She simply shook his hand with quiet confidence. "Phoebe Bernard." Her voice was warm, steady, confident. For reasons he couldn't explain. He liked hearing her name. "Very much." "It's a pleasure to meet you, Ms. Bernard." "You too, Mr. Knight." He smiled. "Arthur certainly knows how to throw an unforgettable party." She glanced around the rooftop before taking another sip of her drink. "He does." Then she smiled thoughtfully. "But sometimes I think there's so much sparkle, people forget what's actually real." Maverick blinked. That wasn't small talk. That was honesty. And somehow, it felt refreshing. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. The music floated through the rooftop, glasses clinked in the distance, and conversations buzzed all around them. Yet somehow, their little corner of the evening felt strangely quiet. Maverick broke the silence first. "I have to admit," he said with a faint smile, "that's probably the most honest thing I've heard all night." Phoebe tilted her head slightly. "And what was everyone else saying?" He gave a dry laugh. "The usual. How successful they are. How busy they are. How perfect their lives are." She smiled knowingly. So, they were networking. They were performing. That caught him off guard. "Exactly." She looked around the rooftop again before saying quietly, "People reveal more when they're pretending than when they're telling the truth." Maverick found himself studying her. She noticed things. Not just people. Human nature. "And what role are you playing tonight, Mr. Knight?" He laughed softly. "I suppose. The bored billionaire." She raised an eyebrow. "Only suppose? I've had enough conversations about yachts, private jets, and investment portfolios to last a lifetime." A quiet laugh escaped her lips. "I almost feel sorry for you." "Almost?" "I'm still deciding." He smiled. Most people laughed at his jokes because of who he was. Phoebe laughed because she genuinely found something amusing. There was a difference. And he liked it. "So," he asked, "what about you? What role are you playing?" She looked toward the city lights. "The observer. I like watching people. They usually tell you everything long before they realize they're speaking." "You sound like a psychologist." "No." She smiled. "I just pay attention." For the first time in years, Maverick realized he wasn't trying to impress someone. He was simply enjoying a conversation. Minutes turned into an hour without either of them noticing. They talked about places they had traveled. Their favorite books. Old jazz records. Architecture. History. Even terrible coffee. When Phoebe spoke about architecture, her entire face lit up. A city isn't defined by its skyline, she said. It's defined by the lives inside its buildings. The dreams. The struggles. The people. Buildings are just concrete. People give them meaning. Maverick listened without interrupting. He couldn't remember the last time he'd been this interested in someone's perspective. Usually, people tried to impress him. Phoebe simply spoke from the heart. And somehow, that was far more impressive. Eventually she asked, "What about you? What keeps someone like Maverick Knight awake at night?" The question surprised him. Most people assumed billionaires slept peacefully. They rarely imagined the weight that came with success. For a few seconds, he considered giving the usual polished answer. Instead, he told her the truth. Responsibility. She waited. My companies employ tens of thousands of people. Every decision I make affects families I'll never meet. Everyone thinks money removes pressure. He smiled faintly. It doesn't. It just changes its shape. Phoebe didn't interrupt. She didn't offer empty reassurance. She simply listened. And somehow, that made it easier to keep talking. I've spent so much time building walls around my life that sometimes I wonder if I remember how to let anyone in. The words escaped before he could stop them. He almost regretted saying them. Almost. Phoebe looked at him with quiet understanding. Maybe, she said gently. The right people don't climb over walls. They simply wait until you're ready to open the gate. Maverick stared at her. No one. Not a therapist. Not a friend. Not even Arthur. Had ever said something that reached him quite like that. Something shifted inside him. A wall he didn't even realize he was protecting began to crack. The party slowly started winding down. Guests said their goodbyes. Luxury cars lined up outside the hotel entrance. Neither of them seemed eager to leave. Maverick glanced at his watch, then back at her. I honestly wasn't expecting tonight to turn out like this. Neither was I, Phoebe admitted with a smile. There was a brief silence. Comfortable. Unforced. Something Maverick wasn't used to. He took a slow breath. I'd like to see you again. She looked at him carefully. Outside of crowded parties. Without billionaires competing to sound important. A soft laugh escaped her. That does sound tempting. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Would it be all right if I had your number? For the first time all evening. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she studied him. Almost as though she were trying to decide whether the man standing before her was the public version. Or the real one. Finally. She smiled. I think I'd like that. She quietly recited her number. Maverick entered each digit carefully. More carefully than he had entered numbers attached to billion-dollar acquisitions. When he pressed save, her name appeared on the screen. Phoebe Bernard. It looked strangely significant. As if that simple name carried the promise of something he couldn't yet explain. An hour later. The black Rolls-Royce glided silently through the city. The skyline reflected across the tinted windows as Maverick leaned back in the rear seat. His phone rested in his hand. The screen was still glowing. Phoebe Bernard. He looked at the name again. Then smiled to himself. This wasn't like him. He didn't chase women. He didn't lose focus. He certainly didn't spend an entire evening thinking about someone he'd only just met. Especially someone who represented everything he'd spent years convincing himself wasn't meant for him. And yet. Here he was. Thinking about her smile. Her confidence. Her honesty. The way she challenged him without trying. The way she made him feel. Unexpectedly human. For the first time in years. Tomorrow felt unpredictable. And instead of resisting it, Maverick found himself looking forward to whatever came next. Without realizing it, the billionaire who had spent his life believing some doors should never be opened had already stepped through one. And there was no going back.